Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode in the series called Rate of Rise, brought to you by Mill City Roasters here on Keys to the Shop. These are episodes that feature elevated conversations about roasting from roasters, people who study the science of roasting, the craft, the art, etc., and the business of roasting. And so I am really excited to be talking with Adrian Seligman of the Scandinavian Alps Coffee Roasters. And today's episode, as this year, we have been sponsored by our friends at millcityroasters.com. So millcityroasters.com, they produce some of the world's finest coffee roasting equipment. Their attention to detail and focus on accessibility, functionality, and just smart engineering to help their customers be successful in roasting is unmatched. I mean, they are passionate not only about creating incredible roasters of all different ranges, sizes, and applications, but also education. They have best-in-class education for coffee roasters, whether it's Coffee Roasting 101 or 501. At their facility in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's really fantastic. And I've been a big fan of these guys for quite a long time. I think you'll be a fan too. So if you're in roasting or you are going to get into roasting, if you're looking to upgrade your roaster and want to learn about roasting, you need to get over to millcityroasters.com and check out all that they have to offer. Seriously, I mean, Mill City has been a presence of good and a force for understanding and education in roasting and facilitating success in roasting for quite a long time. So big thanks to them for sponsoring these Rate of Rise episodes. And with that, I say let's get into our content today. The guest today is somebody who I've had the pleasure of seeing from a distance, of course, until you get this conversation going. Scandinavian Alps Coffee Roasters has been a place that I've kind of dipped into on Instagram here and there, and it's been kind of fascinating to me. And I got a little bit more into the story by going to their website, and it was something that I was like, we need to have them on the show. So I reached out to Adrian, and he is now joining us for this episode. A little bit about Adrian. Adrian Seligman is the founder of Scandinavian Alps Coffee Roasters, and it's a small independent coffee roastery based in Hemsedal, Norway. He has this approach where it's blending passion for the mountains and skiing with a dedication to precision and storytelling in the craft of coffee. Adrian has built this small batch roasting company that's known for its clean and expressive Nordic-style coffees. Their calling card is things like fun, easygoing blends, creative collaborations with brands like Salomon and Blundstone, and more. So, Adrian came to coffee from a successful career in ski instruction, and we're going to talk a lot about that in this conversation, about his journey and then approach to roasting. And we're going to talk about his coffee philosophy as well, the clarity, terroir, craftsmanship, and we're going to talk about his roasting philosophy as well as approach to business and how small batch roasting and being agile in this way has been a real benefit to how he's grown as a roaster, what he's learned as he's gone through this journey, and what advantages this has. You know, they're pretty locked into this rather isolated area in Norway, but they have a pretty outsized impact considering the footprint of the business or where they're located. And you're going to find that out in this conversation with Adrian. So I'm excited for you to learn from him. And let's get right to the conversation. So here now is the Rate of Rise series conversation with the founder of Scandinavian Alps Coffee Roasters, Adrian Seligman. Adrian, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great. I know of your brand as I know of a lot of brands simply by watching social media feeds and exploring here and there what people are doing. And the Scandinavian Alps coffee brand, first of all, the name was unique enough for me to take notice, and then I was thinking a lot about what that meant, and I dove into the story, and I was fascinated, and so I was really excited to have you agree to come on the show and explore some of what you've been doing with your small batch roasting and your journey into coffee. So thank you. What is it? I guess as any story, the beginning of coffee for you, was it just enthusiast to home roaster to professional, or was it a little bit more of a longer path than that? What started this for you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show, by the way. Again, I've been following your content for a while, and it's been really helpful through the whole journey. So, um, thank you for that. What got me started? Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big question. I don't know how much time we have, but I've always loved food. So, and just a subclause to your listeners, I have ADD. So, if we go off on a tangent, or yeah, if the conversation gets like a roller coaster, just they'll know, I guess, why it did. But I guess yeah, food has always been a passion of mine, and skiing. School, not so much. I wasn't very good at school. So after school, university, I decided to move west from Toronto. Thank you to going the Blue Jays here, just doing a little shout out for the World Series. So I moved west out to Banff, Alberta, with a buddy of mine, Rob Trainer, and we didn't know what we wanted to do after we'd gotten our degree, and they'd kicked us out of university on a 5 year, 4 year program, but 5 years. So we moved to the mountains, and yeah, I kind of fell in love with skiing. I didn't drink coffee, right? Like I didn't like it. Born from two expats, so tea was kind of the big beverage in the house. I think my parents would drink one cup of coffee in the morning, but it was, Canadian coffee back then in the 80s was pretty, it smelled good, but it didn't taste good. So yeah, so I didn't really drink coffee. Moved out to the mountains, fell in love with skiing, decided to become a ski teacher, which was
Oh,
quite fun. So took all my levels, and you're kind of in a group of people who've kind of maybe rejected the norm of, go to university, get a good job, please your parents. So we were kind of in that group, and then before lessons or after lessons or in between lessons, everyone was drinking coffee. Except for me, I was drinking hot chocolate or something. So it was only when I got a job down in New Zealand, ski teaching down there, for a 1 year work visa. I got served this thing. It came on a plate with a nice saucer, and I was like, "What's this?" And then the girl that made me try it said, "Just try it." It was a flat white, as we all know back then, and I was like, "This is amazing." So that kind of
yeah.
got the curiosity going, and then ever since I've had that drink, it kind of hooked me in to. I didn't even know what specialty coffee was, but it was good coffee. It tasted a lot better than Canadian coffee, and then eventually moved to Australia, worked there for a season teaching. And yeah, I just kind of got hooked into finding the next coffee bar, where to drink this most amazing espresso milk drink. And then Japan, I think, took me next, Sweden, and now we're in Norway. So
Wow.
the journey's been, yeah, it's been pretty cool.
You've been all over the place, and your love for skiing had you traveling the globe, and then you discovered coffee, which of course is this global beverage that everybody has different versions of, but it's coming from these producing countries that are importing from that people are importing from all over the place. And so this kind of global journey that you are on, discovering a global product, is it's pretty exciting, and how it kind of worked its way into your psyche, into your practice. So it's like your travel companion. When you love something like this, you can become just this really super fan of coffee. You could be the coffee geek in your group of people, where Adrian's the guy to go to for coffee recommendations. You're like the concierge of your friend group or something. Like, tell me where to go for coffee. But then you took it a step further, I suppose, to try to produce what you loved on your own. What was the idea behind becoming an entrepreneur and not just a consumer of this?
I think it loops back to, yeah, again, the passion of just loving food, and again, not being very good at school. So I was kind of used to failing all through my life. So being an entrepreneur came easy, I guess, in terms of, well, let's just give it a go, right? I think most people, I think, yeah, anyone starting a company, there's a lot of fear involved, or who think of wanting to start a company. Yeah, like that's one thing most people, okay, what happens if I fail? And I think for me, it was like, well, let's just give it a go. So it was more of like a Richard Branson kind of his book.
Mm,
And then the food,
yeah.
I was like, well, what do I choose? And something in the food industry, because I love bread, I love pizza. I'm a big nerd of these things. Been baking for years, sourdough. And then I was like, the people in coffee are pretty cool. So I had met some people. Anytime you go to a coffee bar, you always meet someone interesting and strike up a conversation. So I thought, yeah, maybe coffee is the thing to go. In Norway, the coffee's really good. I mean, filter coffee is kind of the thing to be. Much better than Canadian coffee. Maybe the espresso game is a little behind, but out here in the mountains where we are, we're about 3 hours west of Oslo, and then 3 hour or 4 hours east of Bergen. So we're kind of in the heart. I call it the heart of Norway, in the middle of the mountains, where yeah, like the food scene in Norway is maybe a little bit 10 years behind everyone else. I'm probably going to get shit on for that, but like at least out here, maybe in the cities it's much better, but when you come out to the mountains, like I mean, I think it comes down to there's not many people, foreigners, that have moved to Norway. So, and Chris, that the most of those people from the States or Canada, they're the ones that brought the good food, like the Indians and the Japanese and the Chinese and the Malaysian food. So it just doesn't have that same ethnic tossed salad, we'll call it. So, coffee is kind of black coffee here. Meat is meat. Spices is, whoa, what's that? So, so like, oh, chili, whoa, well, we don't do that. So, I think that's where I was kind of like, okay, there's no coffee roaster out here. So we always remember the first man on the moon, maybe not the second. So I thought, let's do something. Let's be a first kind of in the industry of out here at least.
Yeah.
So, and then it tied in with the mountains and skiing, and yeah, I think those two passions together was skiing and coffee. I was like, okay, let's try and combine those together and see if they blend well. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you're talking about coming into a place where, though there's, culturally speaking, they've got the Scandinavian culture, right? But then there's there's lots of multicultural influences in larger metropolitan areas. But you're isolated where you are, kind of in the middle of places where you might experience more of that stuff. You're bringing something to people that is kind of a bit of a comfort to know that they can get this product even though they're out on an excursion. And from traveling, that sometimes you take what you can get where you are.
Mm.
And so when you're choosing what to use in terms of coffee to represent that to your customer, to those you want to have purchase your coffee, what is it that you're selecting? Because you've got the opportunity to, well, at least you've got somewhat of a constraint to say there is a palate that's different in Scandinavia than it is elsewhere. But then there's also this sense of adventure, of flavor that you want to bring as well a little bit. So, how did you go about maybe sourcing and roasting some of your first batches to attract customers and also just make it attractive to you as you did it?
Yeah, I guess how I started was sourcing was, yeah, there's a few importers in Norway. The big one you've probably heard is Nordic Approach.
Hmm.
So I would just reach out to all these importers and say, hey, can I get some samples roasted? And then, tasting them all, trying to see what you like. Because I think when you start off, you don't really know, maybe what you like, but you're not going to know what you like fully, your customers like. So
Yeah.
I was again using Keys to the Shop as a resource of just learning. I would reach out to Has Been back in the day, Stephen Layton. I don't know if you know Stephen, but I reached out to him and said, "Hey, like, can I hire you to come over and to help?" So he did that. He came over to consult for 48 hours. I think he was going on his way to Ireland to
Nice.
for 3FE, his other company. So,
Yeah.
and then I think that was just at the tail end of Has Been because he sold it like 2 years, a year later maybe. So I
Hmm.
was pretty lucky to get
Mhm.
him to come out, and I think I still remember when he got off the train. Chris, he's like looked around. He's like, "Where the f am I?" Like we really are out in the middle of nowhere. So I used him as sourcing. So I said, "Hey, what do you think would be coffees for around here?" And then he was like, "Okay, let's set you up with this El Salvador, some of his farmer sources partners." We had a Bolivian coffee, a Colombian, a Kenyan, and then I think he did like a mixed bag of broken down into like 30, 20 kilos of like Indian, Monsoon, Malabar. And yeah, so it was kind of a wide range of coffees. If I were to do it again, I think for those people who are starting out in their roasting journey, I would definitely, well, maybe not now since there's big tariffs for you guys. Brazil would be my first choice for anyone starting out to get some Brazilian coffees because those are kind of nice gateway coffees, they can be they can kind of please the coffee nerd, but they can also be a cozy cup for the for the for the non-nerds, I guess we'll call them. Colombian maybe is probably another origin. I would Central America, like Guatemala, I think was the first origin that kind of got me. What about you, Chris? What was the first origin that kind of
Turning the
that
tables.
gave you the light bulb moment?
Well, it's those light bulb moments that really make us, I think. But yeah, I think the juxtaposition between two airpots in a cafe in the Midwest was the thing. Yeah, I don't even know if it was amazing coffee, but it was Papua New
Okay,
Guinea versus I like Peru. And if you get bottomless
interesting.
cup, you can try experiment between your two airpots and say, "Oh, I prefer." And when you
Mm,
start having preference, it feels like, oh, there's more to coffee than just this. And espresso is the same thing. If you ever have a good espresso, which is actually really hard to get, um,
I
but
agree.
I still, against my better judgment, I just order it everywhere. And it's that kind of a moment where you get that chocolatey, that really. Uh, you said cozy. I like that. I mean, it does make me feel like, okay, you're in a ski lodge, and you had the hot chocolate in hand, and I think everybody who has whatever playlist of YouTube atmosphere videos or whatever they have this hot chocolate in hand. That's the hot chocolate of coffee.
Yeah.
What is that for these people, right? So that's interesting. So you are starting out with all these coffees, but what were you roasting on? That what was the, because you're a small batch roaster? I imagine it was smaller back in the day when you were first jumping into this.
Yeah, it was well, I wanted a 12 kilo roaster, which maybe in some hindsight was good that I didn't get it. But you're kind of trapped or permitted to whatever your space is. So I could only find a rent a space in Hemsedal because there's not much retail or commercial space. So I found like this old barn, which was actually quite close to the ski resort. And there was two old ladies baking flatbread, which is quite a traditional bread out here. So there's no yeast in the bread. And I was like, hey, I was going around town, I was like, hey, can I rent some space? And they're like, you can rent our office or one of the offices. And the office was, your standard, it was tiny. So I could only
Hmm.
put whatever was a roaster size in that space. So a 12 kilo wasn't going to fit unless you like blew down the door. So I went with the 2.5 kilo Diedrich
Okay.
gas propane roaster. So which was perfect because I think, as you know, you have to roast a lot of bad coffee or okay coffee to start roasting great coffee.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so that's what I started on. Yeah.
What was the bad? Well, what was that season? The season of coming into like that coming of age as a roaster, where you have to go through all that coffee. How long did that last, and what were the big lessons that you learned at that time?
Yeah, so actually now I think I had a conversation like a couple weeks ago with someone about it took so long to roast the first half pallet from Has Been. So I think it took. So what I would do is I didn't go full time into coffee, and I think most people do that. It's kind of a smart move not to just jump into something that's not even going to pay you at. So I would ski teach in the day, and then last lesson around 3:30 to 4, and then I could walk down to this old barn, which wasn't heated very well. There was a lot of cows. I don't think I mentioned that. So I would come back from the day just smelling like, yeah, worse than a farmer pretty much, because the airflow in the barn wasn't so good. So you just smelled like, yeah, my wife made me take my clothes off at the door because it was so bad. But I'd finish work, I'd walk down to my little workshop, we'll call it then, and then I would start roasting. And I think, what do I have? I had 6 bags of coffee, so that took, well, it took the whole season. So I started what, 2000 uh, November, December 2016. I think I finished that first half pallet by maybe by the following summer. So it took a lot of yeah, it was a lot of, which by then you think is a lot of roasting because you hadn't really done it. So you're not really in the mindset of that kind of, let's do it again, let's do it again mindset. So yeah, it took a while, but the coffees, I do promise they got better from the start of that winter to to the spring to the summer. Even though I'm sure some of them started to fade, right? But yeah, that's pretty much how long it took.
Well, I think you're by yourself at this point tasting your coffees, or you have other people giving you feedback about what is like, oh, this, I think you've kind of reached the point where you could say you've mastered that, or at least, you can have a repeat of what you like in the cup here. Was it just your palate against the roasts that you were roasting, or were there other people involved?
No, I would try and that's a good question. I would try and give as much coffee away for people to try. Obviously, try and sell it too. I think my cupping skills, when you first start, they're still, you're almost like you're a beginner skier. You're on the green run snow plowing. So it takes time to develop a palate, how to cup protocol, like I was cupping them probably too fresh, like 24 hours after, which, let's be honest, if you're light roasting 5 days, maybe it's better to start cupping for them to kind of degas.
Yeah.
So I was kind of new to all that. So, but I would, yeah, give it to, my wife was a great feedback loop. Yeah, instructors, I would bring up batches for the instructors to drink at lunch. So yeah, and I think back then you're kind of very conscious of like, do people like this? Am I on the right track? So you're kind of putting yourself out there for
Yeah.
the all kind of feedback. And yeah, I'd even brew some for the old ladies, the baking ladies, who they're so calibrated to, I didn't know back then, but they're so calibrated to kind of that dark commercial roasted coffees that of course they're not going to like your coffees. So yeah, I was a little bit and I think with ADD you're a little bit more sensitive to feedback if it's bad. So I, yeah, maybe got a little bit too emotional sometimes about people's feedback, but I think that made me more determined to go back to the roaster and, okay, let's try again. And I think that's probably one of the greatest skills you can be as a roaster, is just determined to just keep going. And I always say you're only as good as your last batch of coffee. So, and I tell Panda, the guy who roasts now most of the coffee, I trained a few years ago. He does it all now, but we're always cupping. I think that's the biggest thing is to just cup every week religiously, and also be brewing your coffees too. I like roasters, they're always drinking someone else's coffee.
Yeah.
So it's good to be drinking your own coffees and just keeping an eye on them. You know how they change from day 10 to day 15, or even 3 months in. Are they still good? Or is there more clarity in the cup? Or so yeah, it's definitely a journey. Similar to skiing, I'd say. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking that actually when you were starting this explanation, and I really was thinking you, as an instructor, have to deal with people's disappointment in themselves compared against the place they want to be. So, if, as you say, they're just snow plowing and they want to be just gliding like a gazelle down a hill, right? They're it's not going to have, but they compare themselves against whatever the 5 to 10 year version of themselves they want to be. And even if they acknowledge that, of course, yes, I acknowledge I want to learn. I tell my son this as he's like struggles through school, uh, as I did, but it's a process that maybe at this point are would you say you could tap into that instructor version of yourself to tell yourself it's fine. It's okay to make these mistakes, even though you're being, we're all hard on ourselves in some ways, right? But were you able to benefit from years of helping other people overcome their inner dialogue to maybe navigate your own?
Yeah, like ski teaching is quite a challenging sport because you've always got new people showing up. Everyone's different, especially if it's a group lesson, of course. Like you've got, let's say,
Mm,
8 people in a group, everyone learns differently. Everyone has a different learning style. So you as the teacher have to manage, not only the weather that day, the snow conditions, but you have to manage the people to give them a good product, and I think that's one thing that was coached into us as instructors is, working in hospitality is it's an experience. You're not just giving them technical jargon all day. You're making sure, their boots are comfy and, they're enjoying the lesson and
yeah.
they're enjoying the lesson with the people they're in. So it's quite a people person manageable thing, I would call it, to do every day, day in, day out, whether it's -20, whether it's gale force winds, and then, making sure people walk away going, yeah, I got the good value for what I paid for. So I guess, was I hard on myself? Yeah, for sure, because you want to please everyone, whether it's a ski lesson or making some food for dinner for your kids. So I think ski teaching taught me a lot about, yeah, there's a lot of probably lessons you have to reflect at the end of the day and go, I could have done that better, or maybe I just could have described how to, you know, link the turn better here, or it was a bit of powder today, this person was really challenged, but yesterday they weren't. So you're kind
Mm,
of always navigating certain little things. So I think that made me a better roaster in terms of I've always, they always say retail is detail. Um, so I think if you're starting off in coffee, like give your coffee, when a web order came in, I would give a free samples of another coffee, or if someone comes into the roastery, hey, we're cupping this coffee. Do you want to try? So as much feedback as you can get is good. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the way to learn. And
yeah.
if you're not asking for feedback, like for example, in Milan, we were just in Milan at the Host Milano, and I had a judge. We were brewing with the Matzer booth for as a guest roaster. And so you have, people coming up who are in the coffee industry, maybe the bread or whatever industry. And we had an SCA judge come up. I don't know if you know him, Pete Liedica, his name.
Pete Licata, good friend of
Yeah.
mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so I figure you know him, but I didn't know him, and he's like, Uli Christian, my colleague was brewing him some filter coffee, and then I said, hey, do you want to try an espresso? Because I was doing all the espresso. And then he comes in, I was like, so you've worked in coffee? He's like, yeah. And his comment was, I know a little bit about coffee.
I
And
love
I was
it.
like super humble. And, and then, later in the conversation, you find out he's been 25 years like yourself in coffee and SCA judge, and he has his own roastery. And, you know, so I was like, okay,
World
great.
champion.
Yeah, world champion. He's barista champion. So I was like, okay, I have to serve him one of my espressos. So I was like, here you go, Pete, try it. And I was like, give me your honest feedback. And then he did, and I appreciated that. So um, I think it's good to get everything as transparent as possible with when you're learning to roast. Even today, like I think 10 years in, I'm still trying to get feedback on how to make our espresso blends better, or how to make that Kenyan coffee for Christmas sing a little bit brighter and sweeter. So yeah, I think it's definitely needed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. By the way, it's something I love about Pete is that he would not really voluntarily tell you much about
No, he
himself.
didn't. No,
He's a good dude.
yeah, I liked him. Yeah.
So you had mentioned ADD, and as a former prescription receiver of Ritalin when I was a
Oh
child,
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
uh, you know, one of the things that I recognize is helpful if you want to look at silver linings is pattern recognition, and like feedback is, when you connect things that are maybe to other people disparate ideas, you can connect those things a lot easier because your spidey sense is like on overdrive sometimes, like looking at the
Mm.
different inputs, right? And so when you are doing this, when you mentioned that, it's like, okay, yeah, feedback is going to be amazing, because that's a lot of source material to be able to connect what it is we learned in this year, what it is we heard, and what's the through line, what's the theme about our coffee and my way of doing coffee. And then, of course, you teach somebody else to roast, means you've learned enough at that point to have a style that you can pass on to somebody else who's now, roasting for you, right? So I think that's something, like, if anybody else is like nodding their head thinking, yes, that's me, there's some benefit, I would say, loosely, that you could like say, use what you can, right? But when you think about what has coalesced into your style and your approach, your own Nordic approach, I guess. What would you characterize it as, and what would you say is the biggest difference between the way you roast now versus the way you roasted when you were just doing all those batches on the small roaster?
What's my style before? I guess my style was I didn't have one, so it was trying to find one for many years because what I was shown was from say Stephen Layton to other roasters. I didn't have the skill. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to work on your skills of roasting
Mm-hmm.
many batches of coffee, and that goes back to skiing. Like mileage on skis is the best teacher. Letting the terrain teach you. So I would just let the coffees teach me, and I would just, like I said, the cupping table. Always go back to the cupping table to be taste them. Okay, and maybe that's the downside of being ADD is you're pretty hard on yourself. So, but that maybe that's good too. So I would cup and then just keep going, and then eventually I started sourcing with Cafe Imports. They're my main importer now. So getting to know their coffees, getting to know their spot list of coffees, and then once you get to know a coffee, and then buying that same coffee same year after year, you're much better at profiling it again, where you already know where it's going to taste good. So that's where experience kicks in, and you're already becoming a better roaster because you just know what to buy. And to try and find the same profile, those flavor notes that your customers like. So I think that was my style back then, is finding it was light, but it wasn't as light as the guys in Oslo, or um, because I found the people out here didn't have the same kind of brew equipment. They didn't really invest in the same quality grinders. So you have to understand that maybe the water is much better out here actually, but in terms of like people out here didn't really know how to brew these light, ultra light coffees. So I think my style was catered to the customer. So it's light, but I would call it more light medium, maybe, or something medium, depending on or even now we have a dark roast. But I think that was so you have to kind of find your style or kind of find what your customers like. How are they good at brewing coffee? Because if they're not, then you know, brewing a light roast that's 4 days off roast is going to be uh, disappointing, maybe. So, so I think my style now is it's developed the coffee. It's still light, but it's not, light where I have to let it rest for, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and then we kind of, back then we did blends too. I started with blends, kind of like looping back to being in love with food. So I think which not many people did in Norway back then, but I
Right.
seems to be a bit of a trend now moving into blends, or maybe they just don't want to sell test roast anymore. So, which is not, I've never really understood test roast. It's not a great brand. It basically meant we didn't think this coffee was good enough to sell under a regular brand, so we're going to sell it as test roasts. I never really figured that out, but so yeah, if the coffee's not good enough for a single origin coffee, then we'll put it into a blend, and it's still great coffee. It was still scored an 84, 86, or whatever it was point score, but it just wasn't perfectly dialed into the light roast we wanted. So we put it in one of our blends, and it's still nice, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
that lighter roast is better for the high note in your blend. So yeah, if that answers your question.
Oh, it totally does. And I think some people might internally still bristle at the idea that, Oh, if something is not like dialed in for a single origin 100%, you put it in a blend. Is that a compromise? But it's not, because if you use your food analogy, like it's ingredients that you put into a recipe are in and of themselves as an ingredient beautiful. And they wouldn't be a full meal though. If you had herbs and other things that you put on a plate and just a big old bowl of herbs. There's some things that are utilized that could be a side, they could be an ingredient, they could be both. But it depends on what your goal is, I suppose. So if the intentionality is behind it, and it's, I could see where it was just like uncaring, unintentional, throw things in a pot and see what comes out. But if it's an intentional decision to say, we're going to use this in a way that brings about a pleasurable coffee experience, you could hardly argue that you had any kind of misgivings about the coffee.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and I see a lot of roasters now starting to blend. So with especially with the green coffee prices. So was I smart doing it back then? I don't know. I just that was my instinct to just I think it's part of the craft of being a good chef. You take a bunch of ingredients and you make something special out of them. So yes, I get the debate of like if you have a good wine, you don't need to put it into another good wine. But then again, the debate of the best, wines in the world are actually blends. So, and my uncle and my dad are big wine guys, and they're the ones that told me about that. So I was like, then there's nothing wrong about blending. I think that it gets a bad rap.
Mm-hmm.
So, so hopefully, yeah, more blends out there because those are
Yeah.
actually the ones that people, or at least when I first got into coffee, those are the ones that kind of got me, right? Like easy to brew, easy to drink, and you'd want to buy another bag. Whereas if it was a light roast, whatever, and you didn't get the first good cup of coffee, then that could put you off specialty coffee pretty quick. So I'm all for blending. Yeah.
Well, you're a great case of somebody, maybe an extreme case, but nonetheless, I think people do make these judgments about what they will purchase and what they will pursue based on one or two experiences they have as an introductory experience. And if it's not a good one, then it's, we only you only live once, and so let's not keep spending our money on something that we didn't enjoy, whether it was an origin of coffee misrepresented in an air pot in some coffee shop. But Peru gets a bad rap because somebody didn't clean the machine, or the coffee was under roasted because we were trying so hard to like be not dark roast, but we didn't think about actually roasting. So yeah, there's a lot on the line here. But you mentioned the not having access to or investing in a lot of specialized equipment with really tight tolerances on temperatures and distribution of different grind sizes and that kind of stuff, which I think means, like, as you roast a little bit more developed, that there's more solubility in the coffee itself, so people are more successful in brewing your coffee in a different settings where they might be in a hotel or in their house or out on the slopes or something like that. They could probably be more successful. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's if it's easy to brew the coffee, especially whatever grinder, blade grinder, or some sort of, in Norway, there's a lot of these notorious old vintage grinders, Chris, that they pass down from generation. I'm just like, okay, it looks nice. Put it up on your shelf, but that you can't. It's just yeah. If you're gonna be roasting, and maybe back then I was thinking too. Actually, was like, did I get better as a roaster or did I get better as a brewer and cupper? There's always that debate too. But in terms of like, yeah, you need good equipment. So we're really blessed here in Hemsedal with great water. In fact, actually, this was my secret weapon, taking this water for the Norwegian AeroPress Championships. This got me to the semifinals, and I think it was just because of the water. It wasn't because of my
Wow.
terrible brew recipe AeroPress. But do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a under talked thing is having good water, because if you can't, I could take the same coffee and then enjoy it here in Hemsedal. Tastes amazing. I'll send a bag to my dad back in Toronto. The water is terrible in Toronto. It's just the coffee tastes flat. It just tastes, weak.
Hmm.
So I think having good water, having a good equipment, and having a good recipe helps. But I think the biggest one for me was going from like a good grinder, right? Like once you get a burr grinder with some step functions in there, you're going to the next level of coffee.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How do you now, with your community, you've got, because I've been on your website, you've got all of these athletes that are kind of like linked to your brand, because you're in an area, of course, and you have the history to be in both the coffee and the ski community, and sports in general are just kind of like attracted to these rough terrains and isolated areas. What's the biggest difference in the way that you market, if anything, to the people who are in that group versus the passive drinker who, it's the people who are in the lodge that man the lodge or just go on vacation. They're not skiers, but is there a
Mm.
difference in the communities and their preferences of coffees that you roast and the kind of feedback you get from athletes versus non-athletes?
Okay, well, the athletes, w- we don't spend a lot on marketing, but we kind of trying to spend the money on the product and the culture, meaning like, let's share this with people, skiers, skateboarders, people who love the mountains and doing things in the mountains. How can we share that or get them to help share that with the rest of the community? So that's why we do that. So right now we have some new athletes who are like ultra runners, and of course ultra runners they're pretty healthy, and coffee is associated with health. So um, that it's a no-brainer really.
Yeah.
And I use those athletes to showcase this is what I love skiing, or I love whatever sport, and I love coffee, because that's kind of what I love. So I kind of maybe have used a bit of or my passion into the marketing really, or I don't know how I'm doing it really, but that's how it's going so far.
Yeah, it's just
But
natural. It's natural.
exactly, yeah. But in terms of like the regular customer, I mean, we got a lot of skiers coming up from Oslo and Bergen, and from Denmark, Sweden. So, and I think a lot of people come up and they've had great coffee in the city, so they come to the grocery store, and there's, the choices in Norway are probably very limited to what you guys have in the States, whereas you've got aisles of cereal, aisles of ice cream, aisles of coffee roasters. If you go to what's your big what's the
Like
one owned by
specialty, like
Amazon?
Whole Foods or
Yeah,
something.
Whole
Yeah.
Foods, yeah. I'm sure you have like tons of choice. Whereas you come to Norway, you go to the grocery stores here, there's three in town, and all the grocery stores they all own the coffee companies. So of course there's only like four or five coffees to choose from. So that's a big way to differentiate, is just like, okay, let's try and get some specialty coffee on these shelves, please. So all the city people come up, they want some good coffee. They find us. So those are the people drinking it, I guess, in the lodge. Yeah, and I think people who like skiing or snowboarding follow these kind of athletes, these people, their lifestyle on social media. So that ties into that too, in terms of like, okay, like you always want to associate yourself with certain brands. Like I'm either Chris a Mac guy or a PC guy, right? And that's kind of
Right.
you tie yourself as a person into that brand. So it's no different with every other brand. Like coffee is, I want to associate with, Stumptown. That they know good coffee, so I should know good coffee, or do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how we do it here. I don't know how clever or unclever it is, but it's more of a maybe a guerrilla marketing, or I don't know what you call it. That's the way we don't have a big budget to spend tons of money on ads, and so that's
Sure.
kind of how we do it here.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And my kind of last question here, I think, is really about the roasting in a small context, quote unquote, small. You know, we're not like a popcorn popper or anything, but there. What I'm curious about the advantages of being a smaller roaster in comparison to maybe larger brands or larger specialty brands in having what you some being nimble in the industry. What are the advantages of being small in this for you, as a company and as a brand, but also just thinking about it from a craftsperson perspective in the coffees you put out. Because there's a lot of people that may never be, you know, having three roasters in a big warehouse producing tons of, you know, 100 wholesale accounts and that kind of stuff. But they're always going to have a community that supplies them with enough demand for their coffees for them to continue their smaller business. So, how have you seen that be an advantage in your journey?
Well, I think first off is your the way green coffee prices are right now. Like you're you don't have to roast a lot of batches to with a smaller roaster. So then you have more, again, looping back to the feedback, you can cup more coffees. So I think that's one main advantage. Um, and I think these days, if you can get a small little sample roaster, roasting 100 grams, that's perfect, right? You can be cupping
Mm,
every day if you wanted, and roasting every day. So that's one main advantage. Also, you're not wasting a lot of coffee too, that's sitting around staling in terms of like you've roasted, let's say if you're roasting 25 kilo batches, and you're not selling it at the same rate, then that coffee's sitting around getting old. So being small, it's fresh, constantly being out the door. Yeah, cash flow. I mean, yeah. In terms of buying a smaller roaster too is quite good, right? Like getting a big roaster is quite expensive. If you're dishing out whatever it is for a brand new Loring, a 15 kilo, those are not too
hmm.
cheap. We started with this 2.5 kilo. So many batches later, now we have a 12 kilo Pro Bat. It's an old one from like 2004. So it's got probes and everything. So now we're doing that, and then we roast on a nucleus link for the sample roasting. So it's good to have you've got three sizes of capacity. So I think our big roasters were doing like 8 kilo batches,
Hmm.
and that's more for our blends. But now we're roasting our single origin, like more expensive coffees on it too, if we dialed in the roast the profile. So, I mean, I think having the small roasters, it's good, but it's not so good like in terms of freedom when you do get your first, let's say, decent size wholesale account.
Yeah.
Uh, that's where you're not really you're in the business, but you're not working on the business. So, I don't know. It's hard to say looking back hindsight, like what's the best roaster to start with. Yeah, maybe small is the best because it's flexible. You're not going to be need to buy lots of coffee for the batch size. You're not wasting a lot of coffee. But once you start getting some counts, then you probably need to start looking for one pretty quick, something bigger, because it's funny
Yeah.
how it just creeps up on you. Um, yeah. Does
And I
that does that
guess you
answer your
would
question?
have to, yo, totally, and it kind of tracks with what I've heard, and it makes sense for the learning journey too. If you're starting small, and I think it was Seth Godin's like a small book called The Dip, and it was about starting at the basin of experience and using anonymity as your friend. So it's nobody understands what it was like to navigate Amazon's website when it first came out, for example. And thank God, because they wouldn't want you to remember, and nobody
No.
would, right? And as a child of like, I was born in '78 and Gen X, you know, and all that. Um, there are things nobody will ever know about what we did in the early '90s. There was no internet, and it's great because you get to now present to your community at a larger scale some kind of developed version of the brand of you as a person, or you as a roaster in this case, have all of these small batches, but you get a wholesale account that's, you know, large. And maybe when you were first starting out, it would have been way more intimidating, and it wouldn't have let you really learn how to roast. You would have just been focused on being successful, right? And keeping that account, but you wouldn't have had the skills to actually keep the account because you got it, but it's too much. It just bit off too much, right?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I still remember when we got our first uh, one big account, which was like three bakeries, which was great it's great to have those wins. And then the hard work kind of kicks in. You're like, okay, this is gonna every 2 weeks. Okay, yeah, okay. And then they wanted the product grinded too, so you're grinding all the product. It took a lot of time, a lot of hours, but I think in the end, like you said, the person you become from from all that work is yeah, you have to look back and go, okay, yeah, I did that, and it was a lot of work, but it was rewarding, you know, and there's wisdom. Hopefully some wisdom you took from it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, always. Well, Adrian, I really appreciate you being here to talk about your journey and the story and helping other people in theirs. You know, it's been really cool to learn about your approach to roasting and all of the communities that enjoy coffee from our different listeners who are roasters. Will thank you for helping those roasters in theirs. So
Well,
I
thanks for having me.
appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me, Chris. And I look forward to yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and start looking more at your older content that I've missed now because it's all super valuable. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, well, can we go and tell people where we can go to find you online and just learn more about Scandinavian Alps?
Yeah, sure. Well, you can just go to www.Scandinavian Alps Coffee. That's our main site for we have a blog, subscription, and all our products are there. We started a YouTube channel. Was that last year? Thanks to being hacked. We got hacked our Instagram the year before, so we were inspired to just start something else with a YouTube channel. So you could please, if anyone's like to follow, I think we've only got like, yeah, we're not chasing numbers, but we're trying to put out good content there. And where else can you find us? Yeah, Instagram. We're the first TikTok, I think, coffee company, Chris. So I'm very proud about that.
Oh, wow.
Where it is now, because I think back in the day, people like TikTok, you don't want to be on that. I was like, why not? That's kind of our future coffee drinkers. So we're
Oh,
on
wow.
TikTok. But yeah, you can probably just Google, you'll find us somewhere.
All right. Cheers, Adrian. Thank you.
Cheers, Chris.
Well, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Adrian and took away some things that might help you develop yourself to then, in turn, develop your coffees and a community around those coffees. I think those three things have been sort of the through line of this conversation, where you have yourself as the person developing skill to know and to create consistency, and then you in the scaling efforts you find yourself continuing in that learning process, but you then are able to honor the coffee more and develop the coffee and serve it to this community, and the community responds and they say, well, we love what you're doing and we love this coffee. So it's this trifecta of development that really creates success, and Adrian is a perfect example of this and brings a lot of creativity and attention to detail and intentionality to what he's learning, and always learning and getting feedback. That was a big thing too, I thought was really good to talk about, is always getting feedback and constantly learning. So Adrian, really appreciate you being on the show and sharing with us. It's been pretty cool. So if you're interested in learning more about Scandinavian Alps Coffee Roasters, you can just go to scandinavianalpscoffee.com, go to their YouTube channel for Scandinavian Alps Coffee, and subscribe there. Learn more about their great company, their collaborations, the coffee that they brew, and order some for yourself. So, again, huge thank you, Adrian, for being on the show. We really appreciate you. And as always, you can reach out to me if you have questions or comments and feedback about these episodes. It's chris@keystotheshop.com. And go and check out our friends at millcityroasters.com. They're sponsoring our episode today. And with that, I say thank you for being here. And as always, I hope that this episode of Afraid of Rise has truly given you keys to the shop.